So we're going to go through a geometry refresher. Most of these skills you should have learned in Math 1, and you will be using them and adding on to them in Math 2 this year as we go through the geometry modules. So the first part, it's saying to write a description of what each mathematical expression represents and draw a sketch. So they basically want us to write out how we would verbally say this. So if you have this little line above those two letters, this is referring to a line segment, MN. Okay, this means that it's not going to go on forever. So when we draw it, we will have endpoints at M and N. The next part is saying line segment MN is congruent to line segment PQ. That's what that symbol right there in the middle means. So what we would say is line segment MN is congruent to line segment PQ. And when we draw them, they would be in equal length to each other. So I'd have MN here, and I'd have PQ here. And we could make a tick mark on each to show that they're equal in length. They're congruent. Now the next part, we don't have a segment above the letters, but we do have an equal sign. So what we would say is line segment, or we would say the length of line segment, because we're referring to a numerical value. So we'd say the length of line segment, or just segment, MN, is equal to the length of PQ. The next part, we're talking about an angle. So this is angle ABC. And when we name angles, we're going to name it by 3 letters, okay? And when we draw it, it will be apparent why. So if I have an angle that looks like this, and I have point A on the angle, B is the vertex, and C here, I would put arrows because these rays go on forever. This is how I would draw angle ABC. Now, this M in front of it refers to measure. So if we wanted to know how the measure of this angle, how many degrees it is, we would say the measure of angle ABC. And that would help us when we're talking about a quiz or test question. If they're asking us, what is the measurement of it? How many degrees? And again, just like we had with segments, we have angles that are congruent. So this would say angle ABC, this is the congruent symbol, is congruent to angle DEF. And if we were to draw these out, they would be congruent with the same measure. I have my 3 points that are on the angle to name it. And again, with segments, when we have an M in front, we're referring to the measures. So for this one, we would say the measure of angle ABC is equal to, by the symbol, the measure of angle DEF. They have the same degree measure. And then the next part says, write a mathematical statement that represents each description. It says segments AB is equal in length to segment MN. So what we would say, if we're talking about equal and we're talking about the length, we're not going to use the segment above it. We're just going to say AB is equal to MN. Okay. The measures of angle ABC and XYZ are equal. Again, that tells us that we're going to be using the measure, the M in front. So measure of angle ABC is equal to the measure of angle XYZ. Segment AB is congruent to segment BC. This is where we have AB with a line over it, congruent to BC with a line over it. So notice the different notation here with equal versus congruent. And then 11, angle ABC is congruent to angle XYZ. Again, we're talking about congruency, so we don't need to write the measure in front, the M. So ABC is congruent to angle XYZ. And then the bottom part is asking us to make a few more sketches. This symbol is a triangle, so we'd make a triangle, RST. So each vertex of this triangle would be labeled with a letter. Number 13 is referring to a ray, like a stingray, but a ray has a property where the end point would be at A because it's the value that the letter that doesn't have the arrow on it, and then the segment, the ray continues on in the direction of B with an arrow. Number 14, angle XYZ. If I made an angle, X, Y, and Z, it's just important that you have Y as your vertex of this angle. The next part is actually talking about a line, and this line goes on forever. Not a segment, but a line. So this line will have points, G and H, but it will have arrows on the end because this goes on in both directions forever. Number 16, that refers to right angles. So these two segments are perpendicular, meaning they form right angles when they intersect. So if you made this, you would have JK as a segment, you would have PQ as a segment, and they would form a right angle with this symbol for a right angle. Number 17, point S bisects segment MN. So bisect means to cut in half, okay? So if I make my segment MN, I know that the point in between them at S would divide these two pieces to be congruent. I made these tick marks to show that they are indeed congruent pieces. And then 18, ray, remember this is a ray, BD bisects angle ABC. So if I make an angle with A and then B and then C, I could make a ray that goes through, has D as a point on the ray. Notice how the ray has this arrow because it goes on in one direction only. And since it bisects, it divides each angle into two congruent angles. So these two angles are congruent.